we had ourselves a major brawl in the South Carolina-LSU women's game. Okay, for people who don't follow the women's game, and I'll be honest, like, I don't particularly follow the women's game closely. Not that I don't like the women. I respect the women. I grew up in Connecticut. One of my earliest sports memories was Rebecca Lobo, the 95 Huskies. So I've always respected the women's game, whatever. But, you get older. I got a family. I'm watching women's college hoops, or I'm watching men's college hoops, excuse me. We're doing football stuff into the middle of February. But I bring it up because what I can tell you is even before this game was on, it was something that I knew I wanted to watch. South Carolina is the number one team in the country. LSU's number two. LSU is the defending champs. And I caught a little bit of their first matchup in Baton Rouge probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And in that game, you could so obviously see the disdain and dislike between those two programs. Two great programs, two championship programs right now. And I say this as an LSU guy. They are the two top dogs. No disrespect to Caitlin Clark, no disrespect to Paige Beckers, but as a UConn guy, I think I just called myself an LSU guy, but as a UConn guy, I can tell you that these are the two best programs in the sport right now. Great players, Hall of Fame coaches, whatever. So I was watching the game on Sunday, even while the Missouri Valley Championship game was going on, even as, Austin Peay versus Stetson was going on. I kind of had one eye on the LSU South Carolina game. And for people who are watching, with about a minute to go, absolute chaos broke out as there was just an all-out brawl between these two teams, okay? So for people, I'm sure you've seen the video by now, but the bottom line remains pretty straightforward, okay? Basically, it's late in the game. There's been pushing and shoving and elbowing and this all game long. And late in the game, a whistle gets blown. South Carolina has the ball. The girl from South Carolina kind of pulls away. The LSU girl kind of gives her a little nudge. And from there, a girl named Camila Cardozo, who is South Carolina's best player, comes in and just gives a literal two-hand shove right to this LSU player, okay? That is where the chaos began. That is where, by the way, fans jumped out of the stands, including, and again, this happened minutes before we went live here, but I believe it was the brother of one of the LSU players. But either way, brawl, fans jumping out of the stands, and oh, by the way, both benches cleared. And so it's chaos. It takes about 10, 12 minutes to sort it all out. And what we are left with is a situation where LSU and South Carolina, their entire benches are ejected. Camila Cardozo, obviously from South Carolina, is ejected, and the game was forced to end in a 5-on-5 situation. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on all of these rules, but what was wild, and this is when it got really crazy, was that on the ESPN broadcast, they briefly mentioned that anyone ejected would be forced to miss the opening game or the next game, which is obviously the opening game of the NCAA tournament. Now, they ran that back, and I think we're still, for people who are watching on YouTube after the fact, it's about 6:15 Eastern time right now, and so we're still trying to figure out all the details. But they kind of pulled back on that comment, and at first it felt like everybody that was ejected was going to be unable to play in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. It looks like they will be able to, but at the same time, it does look like Camila Cardozo, who again is South Carolina's leading scorer and rebounder, will not be available. And so I'm here to say, this is going to be the biggest story in sports when Sunday going into Monday. And I'm also here to say this. It was wild to watch in real time. It was wild to watch the reaction to. And I'm going to say something, I don't know if it's going to be popular or unpopular, but I thought that was awesome, okay? And it's not for the reason that you think. I'm not just here to see people brawl. And it goes without saying, I don't want anybody to get hurt, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. Whether we're talking Filipowski, court storming, brawls between South Carolina and LSU, I don't want anybody to get hurt. But at the same time, why it is worth noting is for one very simple reason. Why I loved it is because if you watch this game, If you watch the matchup between these two teams in Baton Rouge a few months ago, it is a true old school rivalry based on hate. And I think in this jersey swap, everybody's buddies with everybody. We all played AAU together. We all did this together. We all party in Cabo together in the offseason. You can tell that these two schools do not like each other. They despise each other. And there is genuine hatred between these two programs. And in a lot of ways, it makes sense, right? I mean, just think about it at the most basic level. Last two national champions, LSU last year, South Carolina the year before. Of course, if you remember, last year as well, South Carolina was undefeated. Many believe they were by far the best team in the NCAA tournament. And they go to the Final Four. They lose to Caitlin Clark in Iowa. And it's LSU that plays Iowa for the championship. That was when we had the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese back and forth. But it was LSU that won the national championship. And so last season, LSU had what South Carolina thought was theirs. They come into this game, an SEC title is on the line, and I am here to tell you, I know I keep saying it. I hate to keep reiterating and repeating myself. But at the same time, if you watch this game, it was chippy and it was a little mean-spirited, which, by the way, I'm okay with. I like chippiness. I like genuine hatred in my sports. But if you were watching this game, it was jawing after every play. Not every play, but you get the point. It was a lot of jawing. It was a lot of talking. I'll say this. The refs in the women's game let their players get away with a lot more than the refs in the men's game. I was telling producer Matt before the show, right before the brawl happened, I think it was South Carolina scored a bucket, or maybe it was LSU. I'm not trying to pick sides on who was right and who was wrong because both teams were just talking back and forth the whole game. But one girl got a bucket and got right up in the other girl's face. And I was like, they would never allow this in the men's game. Like last week, Cam Spencer from UConn hits a big three at Marquette. He turns and looks at the Marquette fans and is immediately teed up. And so I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong. But at least in this game, they let these girls play. And again, the hatred is real. And so in this sports world, where everybody has to pretend like they're all best friends, and in many cases they are. Like, listen, I grew up on, I'm a little young for Magic versus Bird, but I grew up on, whatever, MJ versus the Knicks. I grew up on, you go through the list of Braves Mets back in the day was big in the NL East. Mets Yankees, that Subway World Series. Genuine hatred, I don't think we really see that anymore in sports. Like I said, I think in the men's college game, players just move too often. Yeah, everybody's leaving after every year. You don't like Duke, North Carolina was intense on Saturday, but it wasn't like this if you were watching both games. Same with Tennessee, Kentucky. So it was fun. It was entertaining. It was back and forth. I thought it was relatively must-see TV. Again, not rooting for anybody to get hurt. It does not appear as though that was the case. But man, oh man, oh man. It was intense. It was fun. I'm biased, but I hope we get to see these two teams play in the NCAA tournament.